and welcome. I'm Sheena Williams with Krav Maga Salem and the Art of Badass. Speaking of badasses, I am joined today by Raul Martinez, whose resume is as long as my arm. I'm only 5'1", that doesn't say much. Okay, as long as my legs. He's training director and lead combatives coach for Fieldcraft Survivial, which we're going to talk more about. He's an Army veteran. He's got a background in law enforcement, working for Chicago PD, and even a stint in the Narcotics team. So, I mean, we're going to cover all of that and so much more. So, thank you, Raul, for joining us.
Oh, thanks for the invite. I'm glad that this worked out and we're able to get on here and do this.
Yes, I'm so excited. I've already mentioned it a little bit. You grew up in Chicago, and you've talked a little bit about growing up and just fighting for fun because it was fun, and just roughhousing with other kids and how much fun that was. Can you talk a little bit more about growing up in Chicago and just general fun that you had fighting with your friends?
Yeah, absolutely. Chicago's an interesting place, right? It has this weird sense to the outside world that doesn't live there, that there's violence everywhere and everybody's getting murdered and robbed. And really the violence is isolated to small pockets. So the city's actually a lot of fun and there's a ton of things to do for kids and everybody else. I grew up in Pilsen, which is predominantly a Hispanic community, right? So you still have moms yelling out of windows, hey, it's lunchtime or this and that. And one mom communicates to the other mom half a block down and she yells it down the street so that it gets down to everybody. And you're a block away hearing it through this little grapevine thing. It's pretty cool. But growing up, so a really cool story growing up. Do you know those grain silos, those giant grain silos? Yeah, they're all pretty much abandoned now. And the one that I grew up playing in is gone. They've demoed it, and it took forever to demo because it's a giant concrete building. So we would play in there, and that was kind of like our little fight club thing, and nobody was good at fighting. So everybody just got beat up. And then if you were winning and somebody had an older brother, the older brother came in and just beat you up a little bit. And then everybody went and got hot Cheetos and had fun afterwards. But a lot of the time, I still remember that damp smell of like dirt and concrete and stuff chipping and falling, like all these things going on in this building. And I think of it now and I'm like, man, that was really hazardous, but it was a great time and they were super tall. But we would go in there, we'd adventure through the building and climb the stairways and rickety, rusty ladders that were almost about to fall off the wall. We'd climb those and then we'd get bored and then we'd just beat on each other. And yeah, the bigger kids were always better because they were bigger. And then we'd come down. We'd play hide and seek, kind of like we called it the Chicago way because we would be on like garage rooftops and then in garbage cans. And we would just be everywhere and anywhere a small group of kids in a major city would be doing. And we kept it to like a 2-block radius so we could still hear mom yelling in case something was going on, right? But a lot of crazy stuff happened. Guys getting their fingers blown off with fireworks, kids getting hit by cars. I got hit by a car a bunch of times. Just kid stuff, but it was just a lot of fun growing up in a city like that. Yeah.
That's awesome. You've spoken a little bit about how you kind of fell into the Army because of a neck tattoo. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
How did you find that out? Where did I say that? I don't even remember where I tell these stories. Yeah, I wanted my first cool tattoo, right? I got a giant skull crown thing on the back of my neck, just neighborhood stuff. And I went to the recruiter's office and I wanted to be a Marine, right? Every kid wants to be a Marine first. And so I talked to them. They're like, cool. Do your pull-ups, knock the pull-ups out, do your push-ups, did the push-ups. And then as I was doing sit-ups, so right, my hands were behind and I was pulling and they were checking me from behind and he sees the tattoo and he's like, oh man, dude. He's like, that's a DQ right there because they just weren't taking tattoos in the Marine Corps at that moment or in that little time frame. So I was like, cool, you know what? I love this idea the most and I want to be a Marine. I'm going to go get my tattoo lasered. So laser. And it actually hurts more to laser off a tattoo than to get a tattoo, by the way. If anybody's out there considering getting laser removal, it feels like, imagine this, it feels like a really strong, thick rubber band being pulled back and then snapping right on the spot over and over again. So now you have a visual or a physical and a visual of what that feels like. And so, yeah, they were like, hey, they tried everything. They put up waivers and they just wouldn't get signed. So they're like, hey, let me just introduce you to this dude. And he introduced me to an Army recruiter. And the recruiter did the same job that I ended up going in to do as a Cav Scout. And he just painted a good picture. I wish I knew then what I know now. It would have been very different, right? I went in as an E1, which is gnarly. Nobody goes in with no rank, except somebody who doesn't know anything about the military, just knowing that you want to be in the military, right? So I could have gone in with more rank and more pay and more stuff in my contract, which would have been way cooler. But then again, we wouldn't be where we are today, right? But that's kind of how like the Marine Corps blended or the neck tattoo, the Marine Corps, no waivers, Army, boom. There we go.
And you've talked a little bit about, maximizing your experience if you're going into the military and not knowing that before going in. For somebody listening in who's interested in going into the military, do you have any advice on how to maximize that experience and getting stuff in your contract before getting in?
Yes, absolutely. And if you're listening to this or you are a parent that has a child going into this or a teenager, or if you yourself are doing it, look at all of the options that you want. So ask how you can go in with more rank, because either I was talking to Aaron Taylor, one of our instructors, he referred a friend and went in with extra rank. So you can do things like that. Refer a friend, write a book report that gets reviewed and they like it and they give you more rank, or have just random little things where you can get more rank and just go in not at the bottom as a bottom feeder like I did. And then if you want airborne in your contract, you can actually request those things before even enlisting. So you can get airborne, you can get ranger, you can get a Green Beret X slot. So you can go in and be listed to transfer right into those specialty schools without having to do big Army boring stuff. All that stuff is available. You just have to talk to them. Even sign-on bonuses, all of those things. I think I had a 40 grand sign-on bonus when I first enlisted, and it was still a fun time. So those are all things you guys can request, and you don't have to sign up. You don't have to sign anything unless you get what you want. So look at all those options. And when I talk to kids here, because we help out a lot with our recruiting staff here, the guys here are pretty cool about it. They want guys to go into Ranger stuff. They want them to do Green Beret stuff. So they're always pumping them and putting it into their contracts. But you can get all that stuff in writing before you even sign up. So don't lose out on those options.
So even though you started or entered into basic, as you said, a bottom feeder, can you tell us a little bit more about receiving the Patton Award for leadership?
Oh, yeah. That's actually one of my really proud moments. I've had a ton, but that was a cool one because I really looked up to the drill sergeant who put me in for it. And so a lot of what he mentioned what it was, and it was one of our final ruck marches. And a lot of the guys were falling behind. And I don't know how I think it's because I'm small. I'm like short and I'm stocky, strong legs, strong back. So I can ruck forever. I can run for a long period of time. Not necessarily fast, but I'll go forever. And one of the final, two exercises now that I remember correctly, right? One was a mount exercise. So you go into like a mock village and you have to go and complete some objectives, and you got a radio guy and you have to call everything in, and it's like a giant mission thing on a cool scale where you're going in with like 10 guys, and it's paintball. So we're shooting paintballs at each other. We're having fun. One of the dude with the radio, poor guy, he didn't want to do it. And he's the radio guy, so he's a target, right? So he gets nailed. He goes down. The drill sergeant's standing over both of us. I'm the last man standing at this point, right? There's still 2 buildings with people in them. And he's like, what are you going to do, man? What are you going to do now? I was like, grab the radio and carry on. And he's like, show me. So I grab the radio. I call it in. I call in that I'm the last guy. Go into a building. I clear the whole building. Nail 3 dudes in that building. And I'm looking at the other building like, holy shit, here we go. Drenched in sweat, having a blast, right? Because this is so much fun. And it feels so real, right? Because you have them yelling at you. You are getting stuff shot at you. You're just having a good time. And I was having a great time. But I remember being like just exhilarated, like, oh, man, this is epic. And I run to the next building. I'm calling it all in. I kill everybody or mock kill everybody in that building. And then I walk out and he looks at me and he's like, though I am the lone survivor. And he just like plants that seed. And I was like, holy shit. So a lot came from that moment. And that was when I think he and I bonded. And you don't bond necessarily like, oh, we're brothers now. But he had this look in his eye like, holy shit, dude. And I had a feeling inside from the look that he gave me. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Like when you look at a kid and you're really proud of them.
Yeah.
It felt like that.
If you've ever had a good coach, you've probably experienced something similar.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, absolutely. That's a really great reference to, or a way to explain that, because that's what it felt like. And so we carry on, and then the final ruck march, it's a pretty long ruck. And a lot of dudes were falling behind. And instead of just being cool and finishing first, I went back and grabbed all my guys. So I had one dude latch onto my rucksack. I'm like, dude, just grab me and I'll pull you. And I was pushing another dude from behind. And he comes back, yells at me for doing that, because you're not supposed to like physically help each other. So he makes us separate, and then he's like, well, what happens when I'm not looking happens when I'm not looking. So he turns around, goes back up. I grab those dudes again, and we go, and we all finish together. And I think those are the things that led to me getting that award, which was pretty neat. I was just doing it because I like everybody to do good and not fail. So I think to me too, it was like, if we complete this as a whole, as a team, it looks better than like, hey, 5 of us made it and you guys suck back there. But we're also being rated by the guys who suck on our team because we didn't do anything for them.
Yeah.
So, I think that's what led to it. And he gave me the award himself, which I had the feeling those 2 events were key components to getting that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is a big deal. You've spoken a little bit about kind of leaving the military abruptly and seeing veterans and wondering, is that going to be me in my future? And, at some point in time, I mean, you kind of had that mindset of, I need to do something different, or I need to shift what I'm doing. Can you offer a little advice about opportunities or programs that are available to people when they leave the military and how to take advantage of that?
Yeah, so the transition out, and so those fun stories kind of like this kind of becomes a little more somber. It's a weird transition out. So for us, when we came back, I was like done with it. The leadership was bad, and I was just kind of over. It was over right when I came back from deployment. I was like, that's it. I'm not going to do anything anymore. Like, I'm done. Leadership was bad. And when I came back, because we were rear detachment, so I stayed an extra 3 months. When I came back, it was no more like parades, people hugging you and all this. We got home at night, got off the plane, got in a truck, went to the barracks, continued to do work. No, hey, welcome back. No debriefs, no mental evals, nothing. So it's like fend for yourself kind of deal.
Yeah.
And we did, but I was over it. I was over it active duty, because that kind of leads me to drill sergeant in school and doing the reserve stuff on the outside world. But yeah, I was over it. I came out, transitioned, and it was just like this weird, what do I do now? They told me that all my skills were just truck driver. And I was like, okay, I like driving, I guess. But then not realizing there's so many more. That's just like some weird like skill transfer, having come from a combat MOS. How do you transfer room clearing to civilian life, right? So it was a weird time. You kind of go through this emotional roller coaster of, well, was it worth it? Was everything that I did good enough? Like all this crazy stuff people don't understand. And a little bit of time spent internalizing and then evaluating those feelings, right? So after that, then you're like, okay, cool. I can start to see how now I have to adapt to this. I adapted one time to being in the military, but I've already lived a civilian life. So then I can just come back to it, right? It's just about readapting. And then the readaption stuff, though, causes a lot of grief with like relationships and friends and family, because you don't think they get it, but they do get it. It's just a separate scale, right? So if you're a veteran transitioning out, know that it takes a little bit of time. Nothing comes quickly. It's just like learning a new skill, right? Adapting to a new environment is the same thing. And that's what it really is, transferring out of the military where, and I don't want to make it seem like it's like prison, but you do get food, you get fed, the hours are set, you get somewhere to live, you get clothing, so you don't have to buy stuff unless you want extra stuff. So a lot of it's very institutionalizing, right? And so you come out and then nobody's in charge of you. You don't have to be anywhere at any time. And you're kind of like, well, shit, what do I do? Because we are creatures of habit, and those habits become ingrained, and you really get comfortable with schedules. Yeah. So just create a new schedule. Hey, man, I'm going to wake up and run every day at this time, or do this at this time, or watch this show, or read this book. Create timelines for yourselves. And this is, again, more just help for those guys getting out. But it was a weird transition initially, which led me into contracting, which led me into falling into the Chicago Police Department, which I didn't even apply for myself, believe it or not. But yeah, if you're transitioning out, it's okay to have those feelings. It's okay to feel like you don't connect at first. You will. People will understand. Talk to people. I think the biggest thing that happened to me, and it happens to a lot of guys that I talk to, is you want to just not share anything because people won't understand. And people do understand. They'll just understand on their level.
Yeah.
And that's okay, right? So if somebody hasn't had the same life experiences, people still go through hardships. Just because it wasn't the same hardship that you went through doesn't change much. It's still a hardship and people can relate. So a big message to the veterans doing that feel like nobody gets it. Like, just talk to people, man. It really helps. Share your stories. The more you share, the more you talk, the more it goes out and the better you feel about it. So when I do podcasts with our veterans, we talk about that. We'll talk about shitty stories that now they're like, oh man, we talked about it. And after the fact, they're like, man, I feel really good to share that. And it does. It really does. Even these stories just randomly, like now I'm having like these crazy memories of how military life was. And it was great. Though at some point you're like, screw this, it was shitty. It really is just a great time. And just look at all the good stuff, look at the bad stuff, get the lessons that you were supposed to get and move on.
Well, and I think you have a unique perspective too, being military and law enforcement. I mean, you've seen in both those worlds where it's really hard for some odd reason to reach out and tell people you're not okay and that you need help. And there's a massive stigma around that. And coming from both worlds, you have that unique perspective. And you're also really good about sharing, hey, it is okay. I've been through these things, right? And it's okay to ask for help. What do you think really is behind that driving force for us to think, well, it's not okay to ask for help?
It's that whole macho bravado, this is like a cool guy job thing. And I get it. It totally is. But also being macho and cool guy encompasses the ability to process your own feelings and talk about them, because that's how we teach the next set of dudes a lot of it comes from the design of society, right? It's a very patriarchal society, right? Tough dudes don't cry, don't share stories, you don't feel pain, blah,
don't look
blah,
back
blah.
at explosions.
Yeah. So, but the problem with that is that it lends to dudes internalizing and never learning to process feelings. That's dumb. It's a dumb it's an archaic way of doing things. And if we change that, if we learn to just deal with our feelings, talk about them, express failures, learn from the failures that are just lessons, I think dudes will go along. They'll go further in this industry, like the law enforcement military industry, if they're able to just, instead of internalizing, just feel them. Feel the feelings. I don't know how else to put it. Feel the feelings and then talk to people. If there's an issue, talk to somebody. Somebody's been through the same shit you've been through. A lot of stories, even from like early times, you can relate to them now. It's a human experience. So it's not like you're getting something new. It might be new to you, but it's not new to other people who've been through those things. So reaching out for help is just a way to make yourself better and push yourself further. That's how I see it.
It's really important for people to hear from you, somebody who is so badass and done so many different things. I think it's important for people to hear from people like you that it is okay, right? Because like you said, that the bravado and that, macho attitude, you telling people it's okay, I think goes a long way. So I really appreciate you taking that time to kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. And I've had mentors. So I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to make sure that I say that it's the mentors in our lives. Sometimes we don't see them as mentors, but they're there, right? It could be an old friend who had a tragic accident that now has a story that you can relate to him. Those, again, it was a different style of incident. But mentors come in many shapes and forms, even the way animals do things. I try to learn a little bit about everything, even babies. So we have a newborn, and I'm trying to learn the baby. I'm trying to learn his feeding style, like his cramping up for feeding or when he wants to poop and all these things. Everything has a language, but we give it the language when we invest in learning it. So learn to get the message from your mentors, like Mike Glover for me, Green Beret, the guy who, the CEO for Fieldcraft. Learn a ton from him. I didn't know who he was until we met, and then I jumped on board with their company, but he's been a mentor. And it's not like a direct mentorship, like, hey, let's sit down and let's do this thing. It's just through stories and talking and the way he communicates and the way I communicate and the way people just interact, all those things. If you actually pay attention and you're present, you'll find mentorship along the way. So just be present, I guess, is the message there. But Ryan Hoover was another one. He got me going in the martial arts world. And some of the stuff I've learned from him and from Fit to Fight is stuff we use in our program. So it's just, it's epic.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So transitioning just real quick, so you went on to become a drill sergeant, obviously. Do you have any favorite success stories or funny stories that you like to share, or some fond memories from that time?
Just knowing that you make, so it's very different, right? When you train people who volunteer to be there versus people who are like, I kind of like, whatever. It's very
Yeah.
hard. It's two different dynamics. And just seeing things click, even at a young age, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and even the officers, when we would have training for the officers in the military, when something clicks, those are just the cool moments that I took. And I was like, okay, I need to recreate that. So then my whole purpose was to recreate those learning moments, be it in anything, being in something simple like land nav, or being in marksmanship, or just how to tie your boots. I mean, little things. It's a big deal when it clicks. And I'm always looking for that with people. So I do really push when I'm teaching anything, is I'm looking to see, are they getting it? And I'm like fishing for it. And if they're not, I'll find another way to do it just so that they get it. But yeah, just, I learned a lot about how much I enjoy teaching. So that's where I really decided I need to be sharing and teaching and learning more so that I can bring something new every time.
That's awesome.
But that's what drill sergeant school did to me, yeah.
So we touched on it a little bit earlier. You ended up with Chicago PD. Can you tell us kind of how you got started and what that what that was like for you?
Yeah, so I was on a contract in Australia at the time, and I had worked with this group a few times. So we did a lot of the Caribbean, Barbados, Jamaica, and then we were in Australia. That's their home base, New Zealand, Australia. And Australia, we were hanging out, and I was dating a girl who was on the police department, and she had all my paperwork from the military, right? Because first place to move in, there we go. She has all my stuff. She signed me up for the police department, and I didn't know. She mentioned it, but it wasn't like I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so I'm on a contract. I get a phone call. All your stuff's been accepted. Come take some tests and let's get you on. I'm like, what? Okay. So I come back, I knock it out. And then a few months later, I'm in the academy. And then, needless to say, I ended up being the class commander and blah, 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 right? Leadership. I still get like, I got a message the other day from a buddy, and he's like, oh, it was my birthday. He's like, happy birthday, class commander, class 13-5. I was like, oh, dude, come on. So they still remember that. And it's funny the impact you make on people, and it's humbling. Before it was like an ego thing when I was younger. Now it's like humbling, like, man, I really made an impact on somebody. Let me make sure that when I say or do things now, that it's for the right and best reasons. And it's their development, right? Because I'm getting something out of it. But if somebody's actually looking at you for some sort of hope or motivation, it has to be done right. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So what came first? Moving on to be an instructor in the police academy, like there's a massive theme here for those of you at home, or jumping onto the narcotics team?
So yeah, I have a tendency to fast track through things, and whether it's good or bad, I don't know, but I'm fortunate in that sense. And to the point where at the police academy, I was called the 2-year wonder, or 3-year wonder, because so before the whole DOJ thing. And I guess this is more insider stuff. Nobody will get in trouble now. It's too late for that. Maybe. Either way. So I get on, and you have to do patrol because you're on probation. So patrol, you do that. As soon as I came off probation, I had already planted the seed. And this is my whole thing. I network everywhere I go. I had trained with people in good places. And it wasn't that I knew the right people. It's that I had made the right relationships. So when I meet people, it's all about, hey, if you ever need me, I'm here. If whatever, right? I always make myself available to people the best that I can. So I had met a few people in good places, and right when I came off of probation, the opportunity for a narcotics position came up. So I dropped my resume, I talked to the guys, and it was trial by fire. The sergeant for the team hands me car keys, and he's like, our guys are doing some dope buys. I want you to go do surveillance because you said you've done surveillance and you've worked forward reconnaissance and you've done all this. These are the cross streets. This is the radio in anything that, needs to be radioed. So I get keys. I don't even know the team. He's like, just look for these 2 guys. I was like, all right. So we do reconnaissance, and I'm sitting there and I'm relaying what I'm seeing, a bunch of stuff. And the next day he's like, all right, man, you're on the team. We're going to pull you as a loner from your district, go on the team. And I spent a good year there with them, learned so much about the importance of paperwork, which is funny, right? Because you would think you learn other stuff, but without good paperwork and good storytelling, you don't get the convictions that you would need, right? So we had, I think, a 98% conviction rate because we had the best paperwork. And though some stuff was smaller than others, I mean, I think we had the highest mushroom seizure in Chicago history. It was like 4,000 something grams.
Wow.
And I'm sure a lot of people were not happy, but other people were, right? The higher ups or whatever. Looking at it now, I'm like, man, I probably bummed out a lot of hippies because their supplier got shut down for a little bit. But it's a lot more leisure now that we're not strictly law enforcement. But yeah, it was a cool time. It transitioned very easily from patrol, then to narcotics. And then I was in narcotics. And from there, a position came up to the academy. And it's one of those things you can't really say no to. When somebody's like, hey, do you want to come teach at an academy, Chicago's academy, we're bringing you on board. What do you say? You know, as much as I wanted to stay on narcotics and continue to do cool stuff and be undercover and ride around like you own the city, like Serpico style stuff. And that opportunity came up and I had to take it. It was a good friend who brought me on board. And so, yeah, I was there, had to go through all the train-the-trainer stuff, basic curriculum, just in case you needed to cross-train other instructors. Days, I guess you were broken up by days, right? So you would have like law, then you would have firearms, and you would have gym and combatives. And so everybody was pretty much cross-trained, especially the firearm side and the combative side, because it was easier for us to then go teach law versus the law guy who's never fought or doesn't care about shooting to come and teach shooting. So it was interesting because the range guys were always getting picked up for details because we could do more stuff. We're easier to learn, or we taught ourselves faster the curriculum so that we could teach it because we like teaching. So yeah, ended up on the police department's firearms training team. And yeah, spent a lot of time there, carbine instructor, all sorts of cool random teaching moments, all the crazy stories too that happened on the range. Between that, so the phase out was after narcotics was a phase out on a gang / tactical team. They call them TAC teams, and I did that. So it's just a plain clothes and you just deal with the gangs. And it was that transition period. I think it was like 4 months, and then it was rolled into the academy, back to clean shaven, back to uniforms. So, yeah.
And then you ended up doing some law enforcement down in Arizona once you moved down there as well and spent some time, right?
Yeah. So I came down to Arizona. I was in Sedona, and I was on a back trail. The sun was setting, and I saw a sheriff's truck drive this back trail. And I was like, these dudes get to drive around here? Like, how cool is that? So at the airport, I call the sheriff's office for Yavapai. And I'm like, hey, do you guys take laterals? And they're like, depends. Where are you from? And I told them Chicago. They're like, absolutely. You'll just come in, take a law test, and you're right on the road with an FTO, a field training officer. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I get back to the shop. I go to my boss, flip a coin. Coin says I'm going. Which is funny because I had put my resume in an application for the intelligence unit, which handles like counterterrorism and terrorism stuff for Chicago. And what's funny is it all got approved. I'm already out here working with Arizona. They call me like, hey, come in for the final interview. The team wants to meet you. And I'm like, oh shit, I left the department and I am now working in Arizona. So they're like, oh, bummer. And I mean, it was cool that application got accepted, and I would have done that if I wanted to. But instead I transitioned here. I was tired of the cold. I was tired of shoveling snow. And it's definitely sunny and warm here now, pretty much all the time. But
now you just got to watch for the sandstorms.
Yeah. And here it's really cool. So the transition here was very interesting, right? It's still very small town. A lot of the dudes are from here, so they grew up in this area. And it's very, not cliquish, but it's very like what you would imagine a small town to be, a small town department. So I kept getting we're not doing the Chicago way or big city kid stuff, right? And their tactics were different. And though we disagreed on certain things, after explaining to them the reasons why I would do things differently, they were like, okay, cool, I get it. And it was hard to get them to admit those things, right? Because they're set in their ways. They're training their guys a very certain specific way. Nothing wrong with it, right? That's the way they do it here. But coming in with an outside perspective, a major organization like Chicago, and then just kind of sharing what I had learned there, maybe it didn't jive as well as people would think. Small town politics kind of deal. Yep. But it was the most fun experience jumping onto the sheriff's office, because you get a truck, a shotgun, a rifle, and they're like, go patrol 2,000 square miles. All right, cool. So I'm driving in mountains, I'm driving in pine forests, I'm driving in flatlands. You're just driving and driving and driving and getting to know the area. So it was a lot of fun, a lot of cool experiences there. It was actually more fun, I think, for me, the transition, because I enjoy driving. It's like one of my favorite things to do is driving. I kind of call it like time traveling, right? Because you're moving really fast and stuff. It's just going. It's pretty cool. And then there's like a predictive nature to it. You start playing games like, all right, is that guy going to shift into the next lane? Yeah, his little jerky movements are going to make him shift. And you kind of predict those things. Or when is that car going to get off the next ramp? Just random stuff that I enjoy doing while I'm driving. But that being with the sheriff's office gave me that. It gave me a ton of time to drive, have fun, get to see the area. And so now I know the area pretty well because of that. Crazy stuff happened, like a crazy story that I actually just remembered like 2 days ago. Being new, and so you have your FTO, right? And he has to kind of approve everything you do. We had a crazy call of the dude barricaded in. It was a domestic related issue, but I ended up talking to the guy, and he only wanted to talk to me, right? And so he's like, I'm only going to talk to Raul. And the negotiators showed up, professional negotiators show up, and they're like, we're going to talk to him. And he's like, fuck you guys, I only want to talk to Raul. So they're like, all right, new guy, you have to deal with this, right? So long story short, it didn't go well. I was upset because my plan, I think, would have – I mean, you never know, right? My plan would have been better than what ended up happening. So the dude ended up shooting himself, which sucks. But I think it was – I don't want to say it was induced by our SWAT team here, but we definitely could have handled it a little differently. So when you start to disagree with tactics and people's stuff, you're not disagreeing with the agency, you're not disagreeing with the profession, right? You're disagreeing with human decisions. And this is where people get tricky when they don't like what certain cops do. They think they're attacking the organization. And you're not. If I don't agree with a tactic, it's because I don't agree with the way you executed it, not because of the agency or the people in charge, because you could have made a different decision, right? So it becomes, when I have issues with what happens with like bad shoots or bad physical altercations with people, my issues with the officer or the person, even like take officer out of it, take the profession as a whole out of it, because I'm not insulting the profession when I question you. I'm not even insulting. I'm questioning the individual behind the badge, not the badge itself. And I think that's where if you can clean that up for people, you can actually have more discussions and be like, hey, I'm not attacking all law enforcement or the badge or the agencies. I'm questioning the dude's mental state when he made that decision. And that's kind of how I get away with messing with cops. And I always talk shit. And I'm like, I'm a cop. I was a cop, so I get to talk shit about you guys. And I do. When we teach law enforcement, I'm like, you guys suck at shooting. I don't know why, but you do. And they do. And it's rough. But we get them better at the end of the day. So,
yeah. Well, and I think that goes, just to agencies in general too. I mean, there's so much of that. If you question the agency, then you're questioning all the way from the top to the bottom. You're questioning centuries worth of and it gets right to like some really emotional stuff real fast. And, even you go back and just say, no, I'm just questioning, is this the right procedure, or is this the right question to be asking, or is this the way is there a better way to do it? And you can't talk about it, right? You're not allowed. You get slapped on the wrist, we used to call it the PP slap, right? I got my PP slapped, right? They told me that's not right, or this whatever. But 100%, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. And I think there needs to, and will have to be eventually, some shift in mindset within the law enforcement world to make sure that we are really giving the best, right? Because that's our job. I mean, people get into law enforcement because they want to help people, not because, really they want to, hurt somebody, or they want to, make a situation worse. They're there to help. And so when we can intellectually, intelligently ask ourselves, our departments, our standard operating procedures, the way that we've trained. You know, how many times in law enforcement have you heard, you know, well, that's the way we do it? No, that's the wrong mindset, right?
Yeah, it's the
Just
worst thing you
because
can
that's
say.
the way we've done it doesn't mean it's the right way. So,
Exactly.
you know, and again, like you said, we've got humans, imperfect humans dealing with imperfect humans, and then you add emotion, and then you add tools and all sorts of different things. Things get messy real fast. So, yeah, I really like that you brought that up.
So I know we've done a message to the Army kids going in, the veterans coming out. Here's a message for law enforcement guys, or people, guys and gals that are thinking of becoming law enforcement. Remember what law enforcement is, right? It's a design to de-escalate. We're there to help de-escalate and rectify a situation, not make it worse. So the idea that, and I'm not saying let's not give officers the ability to defend themselves with rifles and gear, but that's what specialty units are for, right? And I get it. But just the concept of the militarizing of law enforcement is just, I don't think it's the best approach, especially if you weren't military. So the average cop, let's say a civilian cop, right, never did any military work, is now wearing decked out military style gear. He thinks he's militarized, and now he's treating people like an occupying force. That's not the design of law enforcement, right? The design of law enforcement isn't even getting arrests or putting people in jail or in cuffs or taking their freedoms away. It's actually the opposite. At one point in time, it was a better day when you didn't have to arrest people, when you didn't have to mess with people. That's what law enforcement was, right? It was like this peacekeeping thing by just being a presence. Now guys think, oh, I need to get 10 arrests in order to look cool in front of other guys. Man, that's the wrong message. Now we're infringing upon other people's rights. I mean, putting somebody in a box is a big freaking deal. So when we wrote reports, we made sure everything was right. If there was any questions, we would look to get the person out if we didn't have enough, or never make the arrest if we didn't have enough. But that was just the way our team was. Putting people, and I've been to jail, so it sucks. And I never wanted to put people in jail for no reason. Or for petty reasons, right? Like, oh, we'll get them in and then they'll figure it out. Like, you do that to people, that's rough. These are all Americans. And with that mindset of like becoming more militarized, if the guys aren't careful, they see Americans as enemies. And they're not enemies. They're just Americans making bad decisions. And I'm not telling you to get slapped in the face and take it. If you get hit, fight back. You know, whoop some ass. It's the way we learn from our parents. That's how we learn some respect on some levels, be it verbal or physical pain, you learn. And it's funny because we learn from pain when it doesn't have an emotion attached to it. But people can't make that connection. So if I'm skateboarding and I fall because I was an idiot and I took a hill that was too big and it was going too fast, I'm hurt, not because of any emotion, but I'm still hurt. And I learned the lesson from the pain. So being able to separate emotion from pain is one of those things that's a grown-up level that hopefully we can teach younger kids. Eventually, that's sidetracking the whole police thing. But if you're in law enforcement, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. The whole militant stuff, I get it if that's the adversary we're dealing with. But again, it's still just another American making a decision. So having come from a combat zone where they weren't Americans and we were actually an occupying force, that was the mission. We were there to do certain things. Right here, when I came back and put a uniform on America, I was like, holy geez, like we're dealing with Americans. Like you can't treat them like shit. You can't just walk up to people and start bad mouthing them. Like there has to be this level of respect given at all times until it's taken away by the individual. So you let them make those decisions. So just know that if you're going into law enforcement, do it for the right reasons. Don't do it for your own ego. If you were a hall monitor when you were growing up, don't be a cop. Do something else, please. I was a bad kid. I was a bad kid, and I hear bad kids end up making some of the better cops because we've seen both sides. Yeah. And I don't know if that was my case, but I treated people the way I thought they should be treated versus the way other cops treated them. So what it's worth.
And then I would add two things to that as well. Like, remember that all behavior is simply language, right? We act in certain ways because we're trying to communicate in one way, shape, or form or the other, right? So, I mean, even if somebody's acting poorly, it's a form of communication. So if you can see past the action as being bad and recognize what it is that person is seeking, it leads to a smoother conversation, generally doesn't lead to a fight, right? And if you want to have any kind of longevity in law enforcement, the less fights, the better. And then also, I always encourage my officers that I train with and talk with to study the crisis model and the way that our body escalates and the way the adrenaline happens, the way our cognitive thinking happens, and the amount of language that actually can penetrate the brain when we're under that stress. Because oftentimes law enforcement gets called after the crisis and the event has actually occurred, and so then we can actually re-elevate somebody into that crisis if we're not careful with our language and the way we approach. You know, I mean, simply knocking on the door. Bro, how does law enforcement knock on a door? It's not a tap, right?
No,
it's always that
abrupt.
Bang, pounding sound, right? Which, I mean, depending on the situation, let's say it's a domestic violence situation, can immediately re-escalate this, and now it's becoming a physical altercation for everybody when a simple light knock on the door would have sufficed. So those are a couple things I would add if you're interested in getting into law enforcement.
Yeah. There's a better way to assert dominance than walking in and being loud and obnoxious. And it's through language. It's how you communicate. I've looked at giant dudes with meat hook hands that are just massive, and they were intimidated by me because I used no words. I just looked at them. And the guy later on went to tell one of the, he's like, of all you guys here, that guy, that's the guy I'm scared of. He didn't say anything. He looked at me. He made sure he knew where I was standing, what I was doing, and I just knew if I did anything, he was going to come after me like a little pit bull, and I would have. But I just had to look at him because the other officer that was there communicated clearly. They were having a good conversation. He was agitated, but I just looked at him, and I looked at him with the intent. I was like, hey, man, I'm not going to do it or say anything because you guys are having a great conversation. But if you step out of line or start getting physical, we're going to have a lot of fun. And I called it fun because it was fun. Never in a design to hurt, but in a design to control. So absolutely. With situations like that, language is big, and sometimes you don't have to say anything, like you said. But knowing the stage the person is in allows you the confidence to address it properly, instead of just giving it the same damn fucking solution that people think. And it's always this hard ass thing. Listen to me. And that doesn't always work. Like, it's too late for that. We've either passed that point or we're not there yet. So knowing those stages, like you mentioned, is absolutely critical for dudes to have more success. And
calm down never works.
Oh man, that's the worst, right?
So weird kind of off-topic question. You have traveled the world, Australia, Barbados, Jamaica, I mean, all over the place. Is there any place in this world that holds like a really special place in your heart of all the places you've visited?
I'm always going to be fond of my small town in Mexico, where this is actually pretty funny. My dad kind of stole me from my mom when I was little. Took me to Mexico, raised me with his family, and I learned everything from how to shoot horses, how to milk cows, how to butcher, how to kill cattle because we had a slaughterhouse. Everything, how to make cheese, how to walk, how to poop, how to clean myself, everything that you would need to be a good human in that area. I learned there, slingshotting and just hunting, just small game. Yeah, it was that town in Mexico is always going to hold something for me. And I miss it now that my grandparents aren't around anymore because they were big. They were like the big drive for all of us to meet there and be there. So it's got a quiet feel now. But it'll always have those memories. So when I step foot on the land there and I look around and I start to play back all the cool stuff, that's always going to be, for me, like a place. Yeah, so many stories to tell from there. So yeah, that small town in Mexico, as far as like really cool, I'd like to see it again, but in a better light would be Jamaica. Because we saw Jamaica on the gritty side because of the work we were doing. Never like what everybody tells me, even my girl now, Danielle, she's like, yeah, I went to Jamaica. And I was like, yeah, me too. And she's like, yeah, it was great. The beaches were nice. The food was good. Like, I was like, yeah, I saw no beach. I saw just ghettos and dudes with machetes that didn't want us there. So it was a very different experience. But I would like to go back there and see that again. Yeah. But
Well, I would
Barbados,
be. Oh, go ahead. Barbados, yes.
uh, I tell this story only in training classes uh, because that's where there's a little bit of danger involved with the potential of somebody shooting you. um, but it's the story of the Haitian lady. So if you guys know me and you've been to training, you know the story of the little Haitian lady in Barbados. So yeah, maybe one day I'll tell that story if we ever train in person.
Well, I would be excited to hear it. Absolutely. Yes. So, I would be amiss if we didn't spend at least a few minutes talking about your MMA career.
Yeah. It's so random. It was a bucket list thing, and I needed to know. I needed to know what it would be like to put everything that I've been learning and training and just it's been festering there. And I think I had a 2-month notice. I said yes to the fight. Didn't know who the fighter was. And yeah, took the fight. I think it ended in 24 seconds. So it was fast. Definitely, I had hard training days, and we still do. We still have a hard training. I think I've had more busted lips, busted eyebrows, broken fingers and hands, and just everything hurts more. And we kind of we took the Pat Miltich route when it came to training, and it was and Greg Nelson. It was if we punish ourselves in training and fight ourselves as hard as we can, no one can punish you when you get into the cage, right? Because you've already punished each other. And that's what our team did. Our team was rough, long days, like redlining. Like I'd run out after like a wrestling session, I'd run out and I'm like trying to expand my chest and like reaching to bring oxygen in because I'm like at that panic mode where I'm not breathing anymore. It's so rough. And that would happen over and over. And then that was just another lesson. I was like, I need to get good at managing this. So then I would sprint uphill and I'd hit that red line and I'd be like, all right, figure out a way to manage this. And then I would teach myself to get better at managing red lines so that I can get over the panic, the initial panic that's there. And that panic is gnarly because you're standing there, you're breathing, but you're not getting what you need. So you're like, when is it going to happen? And you're waiting for it. So the ability to process that feeling, the patience, all of it together was a huge lesson that led to the confidence in the MMA stuff. But it was a lot of fun training. I think I enjoyed the training more than the actual fight. The fight was new, so it was very it was nerve-wracking, right? It's a hometown fight, debuting, and you're just like, all right, here we go. And so it was crazy because it was a new experience, but it was a lot of fun. The dude was super strong, and yeah, great opponent. It was just So MMA career is awesome. I'm debating. Well, I had a fight scheduled for April 4th, and the whole Corona thing hit, and so they canceled all fights. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be no fights probably the rest of this year, unless they figure out a way to vaccinate or test everyone, which is all weird stuff. So we're also just hanging out, training, getting good, working on new stuff to showcase if fights do come back. And I've been fortunate here in Arizona that there's a gym, Fight Ready, and they have a lot of really good fighters. They have a ton of UFC vets, and I get to go there and train and get beat up by them. And I mean, you're fighting elite level dudes, so I don't know. You become humble and really nice. So when people bump me and it's their fault, I apologize. I don't take anything too seriously because now I know. Now I know more than just. And not to take away from any other style, but now I know what a true fight. And yeah, I get it. It's controlled environment with a referee, but it's still pure violence, and it's exciting. And if you can manage your emotions in a performance setting, because you're performing, you're actually fighting, and you're an athlete. All those things together, managed well. Anywhere you go, there's no more threats. There's no more fear of anything. You're just hanging out. You're just a good dude and having a good dude or a gal, and you're just having a good time with everything. And yeah, I think the biggest gain I got from that was more confidence outside of weapons and everything else. Yeah, it was a lot of cool experiences leading up to the fights, and now just sitting here waiting and deciding whether or not we're going to do it again. I'm kind of on the old side, so I have to do like EKGs, and I have to do like panel interviews. My doctor has to sign off on stuff. I'm an old man in a young man's sport. And I got into it late, but it's okay. It's still a lot of fun. I think The guys I'm fighting are like 12 years younger. It's all right though. It doesn't matter, right? Yeah.
So as someone who is drawn to teaching, like we've kind of talked about today with all the different ways you've taught and what you're doing now, can you talk a little bit more about your philosophy for developing students for real world practicality?
So I have this on my page, on my Instagram page, and it's just a simplicity in all things. If I can make it as simple as possible and as clear as possible, then I can get you to learn it. And there is cool jargon, right? There's science words that I can be using for how the eye moves and tracks and tries to find hands. Like, yeah, I get it. There's a ton of science stuff. But at the end of the day, I need you to be able to perform because I don't have you for a lot of time, right? We don't have a gym where people can come in and train with us for an extended period of time. So when it's law enforcement stuff, we have maybe 5 hours and I have to teach you how to defend your stuff. And I call it stuff because I don't like to call things weapons, right? Because it's just stuff. You need to be good at using your gear. So for a 5 hour block, I need you to learn some hand trapping, some underhook stuff. I need you to learn some takedowns. I need you to learn how to deal with a human physically. And I don't have time to be telling you science words and talking about geometry and shit like that because I need you to physically do it. So I simplify everything. My take is make it as simple as possible, give you the information that you need, and then piggyback at the end with giving you options to train the long game. So find a gym that will teach you these certain things. Find a place, get with people that will do this, this, and this. So I give them the references for more after the fact, but everything we do is simple, fast, and as brutally aggressive as possible. We fight on the range, like no helmets, no nothing. We just go at it. I'm like, you have to experience this. And a lot of it's experience. So you get the experience, you get key things, which is funny because the hand fighting stuff that Ryan really brought into the program, and it's one of the most valuable things that isn't taught to law enforcement, which is weird because the first thing cops say is, let me see your hands, right? And stuff on your belt, it's a handheld flashlight, it's handcuffs, it's a handgun. The damn word is there, but nobody's doing anything with it, right? Yeah. Everything is hands, but nobody's teaching you how to use your hands or how to control hands. So it's a really great addition to the Fit to Fight world. And so I've done it where I've taught the 2-on-1 wrist control stuff, and I've had just in videos and talking, and buddies of mine that are in law enforcement were like, whoa, this girl came out with a knife. And all I could think about was you 2-on-1 drag, and they would grab her and yank her down. And I'm like, whoa, dude, they didn't even have to train it. They just saw me do it, talk about it. And go into that. So
yeah, speed of implementation, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I've seen you say, and I've seen you quoted as saying, and I absolutely love it, is making people better and teaching them well so they no longer need you as a skill in itself. And I think that is such a great way to look at training other individuals, especially when you're talking about those people who are going to be going into the real world. They know it. They're going to be going in and using these skills. It's different than somebody who is wanting to learn self-defense just, to keep themselves safer versus somebody in law enforcement who is going to turn around and be using this within the same month at the very least. So giving them that mindset, giving them those abilities, and making them proficient is, like you said, it's an art all on its own. And I really like that mindset. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So, and it's so important. And I think, again, it's this thing where like people want to keep people in, right? This like student retention thing, or however businesses like to phrase it. Unlike most schools and gyms, we don't have that luxury, like I said earlier. So I have you for a little bit of time. I'm going to give you everything that I have. If you want to come, and we do, this is actually what's really interesting is we have so many return customers or clients that come and they come back and take classes over and over. I've seen guys like 4 or 5 times in one shooting class, and it's a level 1, and they don't care that it's a level 1 because every time, because of the structure that we have for teaching, we teach to the demographic of the class, right? So if somebody's a little bit less skilled and somebody's more skilled, we bring the less skilled guy up to the other guy's level and we run together then. So you're always learning new ways, new techniques. You're hearing new things in every class because all the people are different. And we're teaching to the people. We're not teaching curriculum per se. I don't have a checklist that I have to hit each class. I know what I want to teach you. I know the message that I need to get across. I know the skills that I need you to walk away with today. And that's what we get everybody onto. versus I need to hit all these points. I don't care where you are. I don't care if you're falling behind. Like, that doesn't exist in our model. So our model is about making sure that we're dumping the right things in as quickly as possible. And then it is drinking from a fire hose, but studies have shown that style of learning and performance is a long-term gain versus small increments over weeks, which do yield good results, but they're only good for the test, right? And then you do really good on the test, and then you forget because you were doing something for the gain of something else versus individual growth. So the idea that somebody can come and the whole purpose is I know that I'm not going to be there when your incident happens, right? Yeah. And we as coaches do that. We tell people that. So you need to be equipped with what I think I would need for me to survive, which I'm trying to share with you so that you don't need me. Yeah. And at some point, I wish people would be better than me so that they can teach other people, and then I can just take a back seat and not do it if it comes to that. But I want people to be that good. I want you to be better than me. I like when people beat me at shooting competitions in classes, because then your level is beyond maybe for just that moment. Maybe and people do have bad days. I think people forget that sometimes you come in and maybe you're thinking about your little kid who's you're missing out time with, or you had a previous engagement, but you didn't want to miss this engagement. So people do have all these other things going on. So good days, bad days, just perform when it matters is a big deal.
Excellent. I love that mindset. And I love how you talk about, not necessarily checking the boxes, because we see and I'm not picking on law enforcement, but we do see that in law enforcement where it's not training to the level of competency. It's literally just check that box. You were shown this. And I'd love to see that change at some point in time. And I think that's why folks like us are sought out for by law enforcement to gain that level of competency. And so I think that's great that you teach to competency and not just to check those boxes. I think that's fantastic.
And I had this conversation with a buddy, and I know you'd agree that the idea of teaching to the lowest common denominator is, again, it's another archaic method of just getting people to baselines. But if you teach people, if you get people just to that standard, that's the standard of people now you have for the rest of their career. Yeah. So instead of lowest common denominator, why don't we just make everybody better? I know it takes a little bit more time. I get it. And time is one of those things that some places think they don't have, and they don't. But it's because nobody's evaluated the curriculum. The curriculum is filled with a bunch of useless shit. Yeah. And if you clean the curriculum out and you put in just what's pertinent, you have actually more time to develop people than to sit there and force feed them a bunch of jargon for no reason. Yeah.
So it looks pretty on reports. Absolutely. So let me ask you a question. With all of the crazy things that you've done and jobs that you've held, as an instructor, as a police officer, military, MMA fighter, what are some of the most annoying misconceptions that people have about some of the things that you've done?
Me personally, I don't know. I don't think anybody's approached me with anything unrealistic. Because I do talk about failure. I post videos of me messing up drills. I think there's one on my Instagram where I fall and scrape my shin down one of those lunch tables and still finish the drill. Like I almost drop a rifle in one because I bumps onto a car and I'm like trying to catch it in midair. Like I try to showcase all of that because I don't want to put out an image of myself that isn't me. Like I don't want to have to sustain an ego thing. I just want to be me and show you who I am. So I think in general, misconceptions that military and law enforcement are experts at shooting. They're not. That's just a very, you have to develop that skill. And that they're somehow professionals at self-defense. That's another one. Law enforcement and military. I actually know more military guys that are terrible pistol shooters because the military, unless you're doing something special or on a specialty team, you really just get more training on rifle. Yeah. And though stuff translates, it doesn't always translate. And so, yes, not all military and cops are good shooters. For some reason, they're not the best communicators, though they should be. Yeah, I think those are just general. For me, myself, I haven't found anything too crazy where somebody thought, people think that I'm an asshole or that I'm really mean. And I'm actually super chill and probably the most calm dude in a room most of the time. So I'm not that way. I know I have like this mean mug that I think it's just my face. I can't really do much about it. So I try to smile a lot. Byron Rogers made a really good point. We had a Zoom conversation, and he takes his glasses off when he's in places, so he doesn't, so he looks less intimidating.
Yeah.
And I find myself doing that now as well. It's a really great technique. It does lower people's agitation if they are agitated or scared, and it helps. So I do that if I'm somewhere, even when I go jogging, I'll try to jog without glasses on, so that when I'm looking at people, I can see their eyes, I can say hi, and it just de-escalates it. Because you see a hairy, like I'm growing my hair, which is actually pretty funny because it's just this giant afro and a beard, and I'm tatted up on one side, and I'm running down a nice neighborhood. And if I wore glasses and I didn't smile at people, people would be kind of like weary. So I wear just a hat, no glasses. I run, I smile, I say hi, sir, ma'am, everything. Super polite, because people deserve that respect. And so, I'm not a jerk and I'm not mean. I think that's the one for me that I've seen. Man, like, man, we totally thought you were a jerk or an asshole, and now we see that you're actually not that bad. So I think that's the one for me.
My husband, who works corrections, he gets that a lot too. He's got this just face that everybody just thinks he's an asshole. You know, he is, but he's also a really nice guy too when he wants to be. So I completely get that.
Yeah.
So for those folks at home who maybe don't know a little bit about Fieldcraft Survival, can you talk a little bit about what it is and all the amazing things that you guys are doing, and kind of how that all came to be?
Yeah. So Fieldcraft Survival as a whole, we're a training company, a mindset company, and most importantly, a preparedness style group. So we want everybody, and we do everything from like canning peaches to fighting dudes on ranges to driving an overland trip to Mexico or into Canada. Mike wants to do a trip to Canada. So Mike Glover, our CEO, he had this idea of bringing all of his experiences in special forces and bringing some of the SF guys over and sharing that with the community, making everybody better, the best that we could. So everything from overlanding to bugging out stuff to combatives to shooting to mindset, medical, everything that is within the genre is kind of what we do. And we've linked up with a lot of good organizations that help veterans and help law enforcement. And we always try to like jump in and do things for like law enforcement issues. Like recently, Kansas City lost an officer, and they reached out to us because we have a hub in Kansas City. They're like, we knew this guy. Can we do something for the family? It's like, absolutely. Let's do a memorial shoot. We'll do, we'll raffle 2 classes, all these things to help the family. So we try to take on a little bit of everything as a company. In my position as the training director, I was tasked to find good instructors and promote training and get training out all over the U.S. So we were really heavy. We influenced the West Coast heavily. I pushed us now into the East Coast and the Midwest, and hopefully we'll have a hub in 4 major regions and have training just all the time. But that's kind of the company. So at Fieldcraft Survival, we cross-train like nobody's business. So we have to learn what everybody's doing. And we have big shoes to fill because of what's expected of the company, because of the way Mike put things out, right? Very high-level professional, great speaker. And I know that at some point people thought it would be, and even I thought it would be a daunting task to come on and train and be a trainer in this company where there's this guy who's the entity of the company. And he is, absolutely is. And it's a great role. And he does very well with it. And when I came on, I was like, all right, I'm just going to be me and see if people dig it. So continued the message, came on board. And now pretty much every class we have is sold out. Mm-hmm. Everywhere we go, we know people, and we're trying to build a community and a tribe. And instead of going places and like just accumulating people and training, what we do is, and we found this, and it's actually super rad. We'll have 2 people in a class, let's say Southern Cali, that live 2 blocks away from each other. Didn't realize they share the same interests, do the same hobbies. They're in a class with us. And I always do that. I have conversations with people. Where are you from? What do you do? Kind of this whole deal, getting to know people, and then them getting to know each other. And it's cool because in our classes, at the end of the day, when we're competing, everybody's cheering everybody on instead of screw that guy, I'm trying to beat him. And it's like this cool guy environment. That's not what we do. we push the pace. It's cool guy shit. But at the end of it, we want you to walk away as a team. And now there's people in classes that are friends that link up and train together. And that union would have never been made if we didn't have that platform to create that community sense. And that's really what it is. We're building a community of prepared individuals and giving them the training and experiences that we had and just putting it out there so that everybody gets a little bit of everything, from firearms, like I said, to everything else.
I think that's so fantastic, just creating that community and building bonds and strengthening, lifting people up. I think the world needs a lot more of that, and especially the training world. I just love it, and I love the mission, and I love everything that you guys are doing. It's fantastic. For those people who want to know more about the events, I mean, obviously things are kind of at a standstill, but I think most of us are coming near an end where we're starting to kind of return to the real world. Can you tell people where to find more information? I know you've got a course set up in August in Washington. Our school is based in Oregon, and Washington obviously is not too far. And I know you're planning, last I heard, you were planning on being at Hard Ready in October. But where can people find more information?
So our training calendar and stuff is listed on the Fieldcraft Survival webpage. And everything, and we have a bunch of stuff going on right now, actually, that we've added. So if you guys are looking to do anything survival related, training, firearms, combatives, even links and sources to other places, not even us. Like we share who we learn from and where we do things. So fieldcraftsurvival.com on the web, and then our Fieldcraft Survival Facebook page, Instagram as well, Fieldcraft Survival. And then if you need me personally, you can find me at raul.martinez.jr for Instagram. Yeah, anything that I can help with, that's what we do. That's the mission, is to make people better. So those are the platforms we're on. They can find us there. If you ever need to email me, training@Fieldcraft Survival is my email with the company. So I'm here. I'm just another resource for you, your school, your people, your friends. Reach out.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time and talking with us a little bit more about just all the amazing things that you've done and encouraging people to get more training and the right types of training. You guys, I'm going to link all the information that we've talked about below. So please click and subscribe to the YouTube channels and all the other amazing stuff they've got going on, because there's so much knowledge to be shared, and it's certainly worth a follow. So again, thank you so much for your time, and guys, reach out if you have questions, okay?
I hope somebody does, and we'll chat with them as well. If you're into podcasts, our podcast is actually pretty rad. I get to do some interviews. All the team gets to do their own interviews, which is pretty cool, instead of just one person. So yeah, check out the podcast. I think I have one recently, maybe like the last episode or the one before, but that's the Fieldcraft Survival podcast. So that's a good one. Even I listen to it, and I just hearing the story over again. And it's so different when you interview someone, like how we're doing, like having this conversation. I'll go back even to the conversations I've had where I'm doing the flip side of it. And I'm like, oh man, okay, next time I'm going to ask this, or I'll end up calling them and being like, hey man, I missed something. Just for me, I want to know this. But yeah, it's really cool. And I didn't think I was going to get into podcasts the way that I did. And that's definitely a cool thing. So podcast stuff.
Awesome. And yes, I'll link that all below. And to everybody else, thanks for stopping by today. There'll be more to come next week, and we'll see you again here soon.
Yeah. Thanks again for everything.